to those participating tonight, and a warm welcome to Charles Brian Quinn, who has graciously joined us for an Ask Me Anything talk, where we will learn from him about his career path. I'm going to go ahead and introduce him briefly myself. I am Ashley Rose Edgar, the Director of Career Development for the College of Computing. And Charles Brian Quinn will be speaking quite in depth about himself this evening, but first I wanted to just give a quick overview of his background and sort of what we'll contextually be hearing about tonight. So CBQ earned his Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from Georgia Tech in 2003, and he is an entrepreneur. He currently holds 4 titles. He is the managing member and founder of Kelp Engine, board member and co-owner of Big Nerd Ranch, CTO at Cloud Tags, and CTO of the Blue Ages. Tonight will provide an opportunity for College of Computing constituents to connect with CBQ to learn his career path and what it took to get him where he is today. So without further ado, I will open the floor up for you, CBQ. If you would just start by telling us more about your background.
Thanks again for having me. Wonderful program that you have here, and hopefully I can be of use. A source of knowledge for some Georgia Tech computer science students. So a little background. I'm a nerd. I grew up surrounded by computers and programming, and I remember very fond dad finishing his dissertation in psychology. He went to Georgia State right off the street. I used computers to do psychological testing. I remember writing basic, I think it was Basic A, programs and games. We had our old, in the Apple II, we had Commodore, we had, the first IBM PC, and I remember writing a game in Basic that basically was like and it said, okay, tell me, so you type in name, and they say, Charles, think of your favorite fruit and then spell it. And IT, the word it, the program said something like, I tricked you, you spelled it, not your favorite fruit, in a loop. And I remember go to 70, go to 70, would loop over that until you ended the program. So I don't know if that was my first program, but one of my favorites, right? So I love writing programming. I love writing software, and now I get to help create more software developers and build software, and that is very useful every day. And yes, I definitely still program. It's one of my hobbies. Later, you could add the window shades in my home if you go around. So more sort of background after that. I did the International Baccalaureate program in school, which is kind of like AP. I loved learning, loved school. I used to overcommit to many things like marching band and cross country and track, and some of them all happened at the same time. So I remember being in the marching band and being terrible at it because there were so many cross country meets, and I missed all the presses. I also worked in a small computer store throughout all high school, where I kind of basically ran our build repair shop, which meant I would take these phone calls in the middle of the day on those big ones in the middle of class, which kind of got me into trouble. But it ended me up at Georgia Tech and as a computer scientist, and loving it ever since.
Perfect depth, and it's funny to think about you using flip phones and how you learned so many years ago how to code and been so impassioned to pursue what you have thus far in your career. So it's really enjoyable and interesting to learn of it. I'd like to hear more about what you have a hand in many different areas and companies, so this will probably be quite detailed, but we'd love to just know more about your roles and responsibilities. So what you do maybe on a daily basis, and generally speaking, how do you describe your career endeavors when people ask you what you do in the world of work?
It's an interesting question because I think the answer is a bad one. I do right now. I have a few too many things that I'm involved with right now. I have a good mix, but the boards of the companies that I serve on, the boards of the companies that I work in don't agree. But I do as I say, not as I am. Right now, I'm involved with 4 different things. Kelp Engine is the advisory services company, basically the holder company for what I do. And basically, as a founding member of that, my job is to advise and consult these companies. Falling under that would be the 3 different projects that I'm working on. I think you mentioned the 2 CTO roles. Both of those are fractional CTO, so neither company believes in some kind of aspect that they're getting a full-time CTO. That's part of the role, and part of the agreement with them is that I'm a fractional CTO. So for both of those roles, time, and they know what the days they are, but I tend to overcommit, and I'll work for many of them. So I pull them and to the offices. We have 2 of the CTO companies that I am, both Cloud Tags and for the Blue Pages. Companies have offices. One is a startup located in the market, which is actually where I am today. I got a cool view. I'll actually show you guys this view from the Ponce City market window, and you can see that's the Whole Foods and you can see a skyline of Buckhead. Kind of a dreary day. There's the Beltline over there. It usually gets pretty busy right about now. But a fun little office for a bit of the time. Going back to what I do on a day-to-day basis, and the companies that I invested in and own, alternatively to that, I help the CEOs and leadership teams. So whatever their strategic goals are, from targeting new industries to developing technology. In CEO roles that I'm in charge of our technology process and our people. So my job is to learn and listen and help those teams to succeed. We make small experimental changes, we measure them, we introduce best practices from previous experience and whatever the current reality is. We have a variety of technologies, and we have varying team sizes. In those CTO roles, love helping the CEO, because I've been one before, answer the fundamental questions around technology. What needs to be delivered? What happens if we change this? How accurate is the vision? How good is technology? How good is our team? Our product? All those questions. So everything's different. Sometimes it's sometimes it's a lot of meetings. Sometimes it's kind of getting down and dirty with some of our vendors. Sometimes it's coaching and working with our technology teams to help make sure that they're building the correct things. I'm too specific in some of those, but happy to delve into those if necessary.
Perfect. It was enlightening. Specifically enjoyed the view of Atlanta. Thank you for sharing that outside of one of your many office buildings. It's appreciated. And you basically wear a lot of hats, so there's a lot of depth to what you're doing on a daily basis, a lot of different working parts, a lot of people, a lot of teams, and just a lot of elements to attend to. So if you could just go into a little bit of depth on what you find to be most enjoyable about your job versus what is most challenging about your job, that would be great.
One of the things that I think does allow me to do this is that I have had experience these roles and as a CEO and as a board member of a few companies. So one of the things that I am good at is I'm very structured. So I can and be present and get into the zone, if you will, for these various companies. So it's not, I think that's just one of my skills. But specifically, I think you were asking about what do I enjoy. So I really do enjoy that. I love being able to leverage the different aspects of each company that I'm involved with and kind of do that. So for instance, in one, we're a product company, and so we're very rapidly trying to figure out our product market fit and be nimble with the technology. And the other company that I own, we're a service company, so we're professional services. So we consult with a lot of these product companies. So what's kind of is that I can now see both sides, right? So when we're working with vendors, external vendors, or we're trying to build these products, like I know from both sides the questions what to ask. Managing some of the vendor relationships and figuring out what do we actually need to build versus what could be built with external consultants, like all these things I know. So, to even kind of further that question, I love leveraging a lot of my past experience in building technology to continue to do that for the companies. And so I don't know if you asked what I dislike. I guess the thing that positive person, and so the things that I dislike would be rote, repetitive actions with negative people. There is or negative processes. Like I'm always trying to make things better. So generally you'll find me if in parts that least of joy would be something where I cannot make something better, I cannot make a positive impact, cannot be a positive catalyst, and those are what I do not enjoy. So I just shying away from that, or turning and making it something positive that could be done for good, something useful and not used for evil.
Nancy, and really been one of the main reasons why you've achieved as much as you have achieved in your career path. So on that note, and based upon the fact that many folks watching this are going to be in the process of trying to envision a future, being students and not necessarily having a lot of experience. So I'd like to ask you to give us some details sequentially on how your career path took shape up until this point. I know you gave us some details and context before, but just out of curiosity, where were you when you were, 22 and getting that bachelor's degree, as far as your ambitions and drive and what you thought you wanted versus where you've come now? And how did that path look?
Yeah, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I tried to start a company, and I failed very, very hard, and that was a good thing. I did too. Many things wrong. I was focusing a lot on the business plan. I had pretty sweet business cards. They looked really good. So all those things that didn't really matter. Pretty massive idea to put customized computers in cars, and at this time there were Windows, Android wasn't. There wasn't iPhone or iOS, and Android wasn't around yet. Basically Linux, which I loved and ran all throughout college, and some Windows mobile and some Windows embedded. And so I built a prototype, and I remember a glitzy pitch in front of Chris Bridges, who's also known as Ludacris, in his driveway. I remember pitching to him this computer, and it had XM radio, if you guys remember that one, before it merged with Sirius and XM. And it alerted me that the Ludacris song was playing on one of the channels, and so I turned to that, and it came up, and that's cool. So anyway, even with that demo, the company failed for many reasons, a little too big for my bridges. So I learned a whole lot through that, and then I went and did consulting and a company called Jakarta that consulted alongside Deloitte and Accenture teams all the nation. So what we did was we took web services out of older legacy systems, and that was very fun because I got to learn how to be a good software consultant and a teacher, and I was good at that. Exotic places like Birmingham and Philadelphia and Nashville, and I did go to South Africa once, and that was very cool. So while working there, I ended up being very good at when the sites were having trouble or problems, and so they would put me on the sites where something bad was happening, or the clients were really mad, or we had to treat people, and so I learned very quickly I had the skills to be a positive catalyst for change and for helping fix things when they were in trouble. But fast a little bit, and I had the bug to start something up again. I knew I wanted to start a company, and I was ready to try again. So a friend approached me and had an idea for something called was ahead of its time. It was monetizing your attention. And this was during the time of Friendster and a lot of things. And so we convinced one of our friends to hire me full time. So we're my time on a new startup, and then 50% of the time on a special project for his company. So he gave me money, and we would give him equity. So I had 50-50 time, and suddenly had kind of infinite runway because I just was getting my salary, full-time salary, and the project now had a very limited budget, very time frame, many constraints, and I actually had to develop it. Had to sit in the warehouse, which was actually, to be honest, right next to the people who were going to use the software, which ended up being the best thing for it. So I was in super close contact with the users, limited budget, limited time, constraints, and I had to prove it. So the startup didn't make it. Again, another failure, but lots of learning. But the mobile app and the technology that I created for the company, because of the constraints, was a huge success. It taught me that the constraints and being close to real customers can build very good software. So I took my tail between my legs on that and said, gosh, I'm good at consulting, I'm good at teaching these lessons about constraints and being real close to the customers. I started a company doing just that. We built software with constraints. Worked super close with our users and sort of iterating and building agile products. And we use this up-and-coming framework called Ruby on Rails. The company name was High Group, and I started with a friend also from Georgia Tech, and we grew that umbrella company up and to about 2 people with a lot of successful high-profile projects. And then fortunate to merge that company with a good friend of mine, Aaron Hilligus, who owned Big Ranch, and I became CEO alongside our founder. So a very fun experience. I love being CEO of a group of super talented nerds, very around the world, and we tours and we build apps for many of the most innovative companies in the world. Last I checked, we've trained, I think I wrote this down, 18 of the top 25 apps in the iTunes store. So if you look at all those, and many others that we're not allowed to talk about, but many on the Play Store as well. So last year, I joined the board to go back to building software for companies and advising in technical leadership roles, hence the many jobs now. I've been extremely lucky on that career path and credit a lot of that success to the hard work at Georgia Tech. So suddenly it's kind of interesting, those big, meaty software projects and projects and technical challenges get really complex. In the real world, it suddenly doesn't seem that hard compared to several of those all-nighters and the CS projects that we had to compete at Georgia Tech. So the path there continues and continually leveraging up. And I definitely value the Georgia Tech connection. Suddenly doesn't make everything seem that hard.
Here at Georgia Tech, and you have the foundation that so many of our students, our talented students, are going out into the world of work and making a difference as you have. So thank you for those details. Could you give a little bit more depth on of Georgia Tech and where folks are at this present moment in terms of just finishing their degree or being in the midst of it? When you began your career, and obviously you've had a very, very successful one, how did you detect or perhaps achieve what you wanted to? That while you're a student, you don't necessarily get exposure to real-world tools. You don't necessarily understand how to function in the workplace, and there's a lot of, I think, spin-up that needs to happen when you go into the world of work. What were some things that, if you can recall, that you noticeably needed to attend to when you came right out of school and you were trying to make your way into the industry?
Interesting question, because I have a theory about that, and again, thanks thinking that I've been successful when I talked about failures, although I do think that failure, it depends on the way you look at it, and failure is the only way to learn and only in the eye of the beholder. But in terms of, how resources and kind of things to prepare, I'm a big believer that the education you get at Georgia Tech teaches you how to learn. And, if somebody came back and said, well, at Georgia Tech, we could have taught you Ruby or a framework like Ruby on Rails, or even more specifically, like how to run a unit test in Ruby on Rails, I don't think it's been as valuable. When I think about the resources and things that Georgia Tech gave, it was learn how to learn. If we abstracted that advice out, the things that I found very valuable were all kinds of stuff that didn't actually relate to my career. One of the best UX courses I took was I did the Barcelona study abroad program, and thinking, okay, we're going to do user interface design. This is easy. We're going to do some mock-ups and some screens and all that. And the first thing we studied and did a case study on was the entrance to the metro station, and how you use the card. And I thought to myself, like, this isn't user interface, but it really is. The user interface is actually the entire process, even though the software to do the cards and to card and to do all that stuff. The user interface is the entire, gamut of how do I, more tickets, and how do I go through the turnstiles, and then how do I go leave the turnstiles, and what do I do if I lose a card. And so a big proponent on me to kind of to realize that a lot of those resources, learn the generic stuff. So if I were to give advice to my previous self about what resources to do, it'd be take more classes on the electives around the arts, around the technology, the stack, the LCC, all that stuff, to broaden the experience and learn how to better learn. I'd give myself in terms of that.
To the role of being an entrepreneur and as well as a manager, many students have aspirations of also achieving similar goals, if not the same. What are maybe some, and you touched a little bit on this earlier when you spoke about your positivity, but some key characteristics, as well as being with failures and continuing to fail to achieve success? What are some key characteristics that you might see that make someone more resilient, such that they're more readily able to achieve different areas of the world of work or job roles like you have?
Sure. One of the things I really kind of, people is to really know yourself and what you're good at and what you're not. Your question really is about entrepreneurship, and I think a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs, and I think that's great. I think the world needs more people who are entrepreneuring in spirit, but I think the word has been co-opted, and everyone thinks it's sort of like this cushion where I can be my own boss would be something that I hear people say, and having been an entrepreneur before, I think it's actually really the opposite. When you are an entrepreneur, you have many, many bosses. It's customers first and foremost, your clients, your employees, your board if you take on money, it's your investors if you take on money, it's the product, it's the market, and you have many, many. So I guess knowing yourself and knowing what you're good at and what you're not, your strengths and your weaknesses, could help you decide how to be resilient in the times that you aren't. For instance, for example, that drive pleasure via, right? Meaning that there's personality trends and you can do yourself, but if you know that you need that external, then it probably won't make sense for you to become a person who codes or does stuff alone. You need to be, if you get satisfaction, that I've given people to sort of understand where they fit in this mindset would be, if you were in the middle of staying up all night and on coding something, need your help, but you had to finish this one thing. What do you really gravitate towards going and help? Is it and even if what they want you to do is just build this little thing that really isn't that complex, or do you go back to your desk and build the really complicated thing? And if those could mean different things. It could mean that you're an entrepreneur maybe to be the technical co-founder. Mean that you're the technical sort of visionary that brings on people who go get to do all the things that may not even know how to do. You kind of get jealous about bringing on that Android developer because you're like, I kind of want to know Android. Maybe the CEO or the head of sales may not be the best for you. May want to be a close like the engineering lead or the CTO type person.
Notion of self-awareness. I love that. I think being attentive to what your strengths are and paying attention to the patterns in your behavior is really something that can help propel one forward. Could you give us some details on mentors that may have helped you along the way? I can imagine you've probably had several. So how do you find those mentors, and how do you sustain relationships with them and maybe put their good to use?
Lucky in that I have many, many mentors, and I consider some of my best hires to be mentors to me in their craft. And what I mean by that is, I've hired some very good sales people, and one of the things that I myself am not good at but want to be. And so learning from them, VPs of sales, VPs of marketing, COOs that have been incredible, many developers as well. The first one I ever reached out to be a mentor, which is pretty fun, is when I first graduated and I was sort of looking to start that company. I met with a friend of mine who actually he and I are still a friend. He shared many experiences openly and honestly, and that person, like I said, is still today one of my closest friends, and he's also part of a brain trust I'm in. I'm in a group called Entrepreneurs Organization, and it's a group of 9 CEOs of various and COOs of companies that meet monthly. We've been actually meeting monthly consecutively for the past 4 years. I think of all those that we've only missed one meeting, which is, or we did one remote, which is kind of crazy when you think about it in terms of the time commitment with all things happening in each other's lives. With a testament to how useful brain trust of mentors is. I'm a huge fan of roundtables or forums. They also called like masterminds of like-minded, driven, successful people who all want to get their careers. And I'm actually very happy to be a part of EO. I'm also part of YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization, and I count that friend in that forum of CEOs, C-level execs, and presidents. That one's different than the EO, which is for entrepreneurs, as have been mentors in the highest regard. Very lucky there. The interesting is that I think being a good mentor is a good way to be a good mentee, and I think being a good mentee is a good way to be a good mentor. So I seek out both of those, and that's why I actually participate in. I've been a member of the Georgia Tech Mentor Jackets, and I have for the past few years. Last year, I even had 2, who's been at Google now for a while, we got out of there and let him. He's going to start a company, I'm pretty sure, one day. So thanks for here to go check on him. But I'm also, I believe I've even hired a few of them. Don't tell Georgia Tech that. I remain close friends with many. So big fan of mentors, big fan of mentorship, easy to get started. Ask and be a good mentee.
Forward, and then someone will pay it back to you and vice versa. So tell us maybe about, and I know you touched a little bit briefly when you were a student, that something you wish you had told yourself. Is there anything that when you were thinking of your career while you were a student, you wish someone would have told you or sort of imparted their wisdom? Is there anything there that you might like to speak to?
In terms of what they wish they had told me, they wish someone would have told me, get out there and fail harder and fail faster. A lot of times I think do a lot of these big projects, and we kind of want to make them perfect. I'm all for writing perfect software that works 100% of the time, but in reality, it's never the case. A lot of times I think I tend to, the phrase for me is that perfect is the enemy of good. I wish I would have shared more about things in progress instead of sort of holding it back and being like, if I could make this one more thing, if I could just do this one more feature, I think I would have been. I remember the learnings I had sort of when I first got out was we had built this product, a friend of mine, and we had decided, okay, we're just going to build one more feature in it, and we're sure this was a software as a service product, and so we were like, we're going to add this feature, and then we're going to get tons of signups. And so, work really hard on the feature, we launch it, 0, and we're so then I remember my good friend Eric, who it now runs that company. He decided to just go blog about it on Hacker News, and so he an article about how we just threw away 6 months of code, which, at the I guess it was one of those, this was a long time ago, so it was kind of a clickbait a title, right? Like, you're never going to believe these 7 things, but it wasn't really that bad. But why 6 months of code, which was true, and we threw away this one feature we were working on and honestly and openly about it. And we actually described our product and how our product kind of helps this, and it went to the top of Hacker News, and we got 3 signups, and I was like, So the that I still haven't learned is that sales and marketing trumps engineering. So it's not enough to have you have to have a good product, but you have to have great sales and marketing. And so I wish someone had told me, get your stuff out there, talk about, be good at sales and marketing, and good at in the correct way, talk about the product in the true way, true and honest and open and useful, and don't spend too much time making it perfect.
From the mission of perfect is the enemy of good. So that will be used one day, I'm sure, in the future, and your name will be quoted behind it.
Oh, it's actually, I've stolen that quote from somebody. And
Thank you.
Don't worry.
It's fantastic. I love it. Curious about your perspective on the state of the industry from where you began to where you are now and where you kind of see things moving in the future.
Yeah, I think being in computer science is fantastic right now. I mean, I did an announcement that the public schools in New York are going to be teaching computer science. I think that's fantastic. Heard people say, and you can kind of argue with the semantics of it, but that computer science is the new literacy, that the program is tantamount to future success. I do agree that programming and computer science and understanding how computers work has to become more and more pervasive in our lives. It's going to be super important, and I think it's the end-all be-all. I still think that things like the arts and humanities and writing and many other things are going to be just as important in the future as they are now. In terms of the industry, computer science is a great place to be. Of ways to make things useful. I wish more people would be to get into fields like the biomedical and using software specifically to help improve the work, as opposed to building yet another social marketing tool. But I digress, and maybe that's the old man in me coming out. In terms of the industry, I think I'm a huge fan of the higher level languages. About computer science as a skill, or as a profession, as a subject matter. Excuse me. A lot of you learn in terms of tech might be very low level. I remember taking C and even going down to almost hexadecimal and how all that works. And the reason it's important is that when you get higher and higher level, grail of computer science, if you're building computer compilers and software, it would be to speak in a natural language and have the computer kind of understand. So I could write very specific high-level languages to describe specifically the business problem I'm trying to solve, and I have to worry about, how do I make that work on an x86 processor? How do I make that work on an ARM or whatever? And so that's why I like languages like Ruby and frameworks like Rails, and you look at even like the Android, the newest, Android framework, and the iOS framework now on top of some language like Swift, and there's some really neat stuff happening. I mean, you look at some of the stuff that here is doing, where there's even like a higher level query language to do like natural language processing on large data sets. Some of that stuff's very fascinating. I think and this is where it'll get weird. I'm a fan of the singularity, and I do think that technology moves very fast, and I hope that when computers begin to be able to improve themselves, that they'll bring us along with them, and we will become augmented and part of that big shift in when technology really takes that leap and begins to bring itself, and it'll be fun.
About the possibility of that, for sure. As your career, future of your career, rather, and sort of seeing what the next step is, I don't know if you'd be willing to open that up a little bit, maybe share with us if you expectations for yourself over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Sure. Well, I just want to be helpful. I want to be useful. I want to build things that are of value. I want to build teams and build tech. I'm super into where that might be. I'm a huge fan of Big Nerd Ranch, and I want to help Big Nerd Ranch. Our mission is to teach and to consult, and we want to teach iOS, Android, and backend and design for the world. And we'll hopefully continue to do that, and whatever we need to make that company successful. On board for that. With the companies that I'm working with, I hope we make some of them are. One of them is a venture-backed. So we've got to really quickly find our market fit and either get traction and revenue from our customers or from another round while we build even bigger and bigger. There's a lot of neat stuff there. I'd love to continue to be able to be involved with both. And I'd love to start something. I've started a small little company based on an idea that I think is needed in the world. And I'm actively doing that. I just made my first hire on that. So and we'll see. Open anything, and I love keeping your options open.
That's a good approach generally to a career. The more doors you can open, I think the more you can walk through, right?
Yeah.
Is there any last advice maybe you'd want to give for those who are paths or just trying to find their way in this industry?
I think it may have been the theme of my thing, but I think failure is a great and probably one of the better ways to learn. So there and try and be true to yourself, give it a shot, and always be learning.
All the questions that I had prepared, and if there's anything more, then the audience is welcome to come on and ask their questions at this time.
Cool. Up chat and see if there are any questions from the
And I'm guessing that you have not either. But since we are near the close of our scheduled talk, if there's anything more you wish to share to impart your wisdom, please feel free to do so.
The only thing I'd say is that if there are more questions or you watch this later and you have questions for me, please shoot me a note. My personal website is cebq.com, which is seebq.com, and you can email me. It's me at seebq.com. And especially if there's anything you have related to career and a career after Georgia Tech or before or while you're at Georgia Tech, I'd love use to you.
Well, on behalf of the College of Computing, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the success and the immense impacts that you've had on the world. We look forward to seeing what the future holds as far as your successes as we continue to shepherd students through their career development and path. And students, if you're watching, I hope that you will be as inspired as CBQ was coming out of Georgia Tech to make significant changes in the world. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to hosting again with you soon through the Career Conversation Series at the College of Computing.
Thank you, Jen, for hosting, and I appreciate it.